Hello and welcome to Pods Like Us. I'm Martin Quibell, known to my friends as Marv, and this time, for a bit of a change, I've got three guests, one returning who's coming for a third time on Pods Like Us. So first up, the author and managing director of Cinemablend, who also is a podcaster with the great series Reelblend, my friend Sean O'Connell. Hey, Sean, thanks for speaking today.
Hello, Marv. Thank you for having me back on. I appreciate any chance to grace your airwaves.
Thank you very much. And I'm also joined by the two hosts of Dropping a Bruce, a show that is going through the direct-to-video titles that have the great Bruce Willis in them. So that's Sean and Steve. Hey, guys.
Hello there. Thanks for having us.
So what we're doing today is, between the four of us, we're going to have a talk about Bruce Willis, because it's just opportune that the podcast Dropping a Bruce has started recently this year, and that Sean has a fantastic new book coming out, his third book, the first one being Release The Snyder Cut, and the second one being Spider-Man 1 with Great Responsibility. Is that right, Sean?
With great power, but close.
With great power. That's the one.
Yep. Comes great responsibility. But
yes, that's true.
That's the second book that'll be the follow-up.
Yeah, exactly.
That's when he does the new Spider-Verse films for the next few years, including all the who wants to talk about Venom and all those films, really. But so we're all getting together because this seems to be an opportune moment to discuss the Bruce Willis films and his filmography and the subject of him. So, first of all, what was the history and structure? What's the history of the show Dropping a Bruce, and why did you go for that? What sort of structure have you got for the show?
It's great you asked that question. Steve followed me on an earlier podcast I did called Watch Us or Die. And when my co-host there moved on because he was having a family, I started a series. I still have it, my main podcast called The Church of Tarantino, where I talk about nothing but Tarantino. And my first guest that I went solo. I did the old lead singer thing. I left the group, started a solo career. Steve was one of my big guests early on because he was such a good fan of the other show. We wanted to have him on, didn't get a chance, so I brought him on, and he really helped me out a lot in season one. I'm in the third season of that now. About 9 months into the season, actually 6 months into the season, Steve and I were talking about, we have a really good rapport. We should do something together. And we were trying to figure out what we wanted to do. And we're both huge fans of Bruce Willis, but people talk Bruce Willis's, main catalog to death. There's nothing he and I are going to bring to Die Hard, to Unbreakable, to Hudson Hawk, that's a little wink for Steve, to any of those films that people haven't already touched on. So we said, what? At the time, this is obviously right before any announcement of a disease, he was dropping, hence that came the name, but he was dropping like a movie, it felt like every other month. And so I thought, I'll be a little tongue-in-cheek, you drop a deuce, we'll call it Dropping a Bruce, that kind of thing. And we were like, yeah, let's look at his directed VOD movies, because at the time he was still going to be putting them out. So we figured this could lend us to at least a couple of years, because I think at the time we were talking, he had 36 or so. The other 4 hadn't dropped yet. And so we're like, this is a great idea. And I kid you not, a month, maybe a couple of weeks before we are ready to roll and record the first episode, the aphasia announcement comes out. So we paused. We said, oh my God, how do we start a podcast talking about his bad movies? And he has just been announced. We're like such assholes and no one's going to want to listen. So we put that on the back burner, have a different podcast we also do called Cheeky Bastards Men of Action. And then a year later, we did like this Christmas special, and we talked about Die Hard, how it's a Christmas movie. And we were like, you know what? I think it's time for us to dust off Dropping a Bruce. I mean, it's been about a year. I don't think people will think we're piling on. And also we thought that now that we know that he has this disease, it would probably lend itself to, will we see it? Because if you're watching these movies pre the disease and we've watched them, you can see what people may think, God, he sucks at acting. He's mailing this in. What is he doing? But now that we have full knowledge that he has it, we've seen a couple of movies where it has peeked through so far already in our journey, where you can tell he's having a tough time on set. Like you can tell there's something wrong. And so basically our structure is this, Steve and I, we go in chronological order. So we are currently, as you record this, we have done 18 of them. We're almost at the halfway point. We're almost there. So once a month we release them and we have a blast doing them. And then I will now shut the up and let my cohort talk for 2 seconds. He gets 2 seconds.
That's all I get. That's all I get. But yeah, as we were sort of off air talking about, is we're only going to really compare each film to the last, really, is the way to do it. Because we're not going to, like you said, we're not going to compare a lot of these films to Die Hard. That's a waste of time. But there's been some surprises. There's been some pretty terrible movies. But that it soon became apparent it was like community theatre, that like it was like a family thing going on almost, where you've got the same people in the movies, the same as we've just done, the same directors. So structure-wise, what we do, like the fun part for us, we don't really talk about it until we're going to record. So I don't know what Scott thought of the movie, and he doesn't know what I thought of the movie either. We try and unearth as much background info on the movie as we can, but that can be quite difficult at times, especially when you want to discuss things like budget and box office, which is sometimes a bit unfair because they barely came out theatrically at all. They're in very few territories. So you can often find box office, but you can rarely find budget unless you're really willing to go deep, deep, deep. But yeah, so it's just two guys talking about movies, but we love Bruce Willis.
Mm-hmm.
We really do. And like Scott said, that would have just been in such bad taste to do it the first time around, because we knew some of these movies were going to be tough going, but we gave it some time, and then we sort of came to the conclusion that they should be discussed. They've got every reason and right to be discussed, much like anything else. And here we are, slap bang, right, nearly in the middle. We're nearly in the middle. So yeah.
So what made you decide to just do the straight to, shall I come out with a term that you guys use?
Sure, absolutely.
Yes.
Why do the straight to disc, as you call them, STD? There's the joke in the show. Why do those and not do the entire catalogue?
I think kind of like what Steve was saying, when you start podcasting, especially nowadays, since 2020, podcasting has, I think, exploded even more because people realize you can do it at home. I think all four of us are currently recording in some room where prior to, I think, 2020, the belief was you had to be in a studio, almost as if you were in like a radio studio, and it had to seem very professional, and you had to have engineers and people paid around the clock. And then people realized, I don't have to do that at all. I don't have to spend any money to do this, really. And we can talk. So then you've got to try to break through the noise of who's speaking about what and why, what do you have to bring to it that's going to mean a damn thing. And so we knew that talking Die Hard and every great Bruce Willis movie he's been in has already been talked about. People have already covered this on numerous podcasts. So outside of us finding some stupid little gag that we could do to do it, it wasn't going to add anything. Also, I think we've also, through our journey on our Cheeky Bastards podcast, we have liked to rewatch movies or watch new movies and get reappraisal of them. So we said, you know what? Let's go ahead and ground this new territory. Let's go into something we don't know how it's going to be. We're going to go in assuming they're going to be garbage. But once we started realizing after the aphasia, and then we now had new information, we now knew that we had like this, I don't want to say like the diagnosis was a positive for us, but it gave us a new perspective that prior to, anyone else who's watched these movies has just been like, this guy has lost his touch. Now we get to see, where is Bruce like really putting in a performance? And some of them you're like, man, like they could have been filmed like a month or two apart. And 2 months earlier, he looks there's one movie he looks awful in. He actually looks physically sick, looks terrible in. As the movie goes, they shot all his scenes in chronological order, which is usually not how a movie's made. But because he's there a day, they shot in the morning to night. And in the morning, it's really rough. But by the time we get to his night scenes, Bruce has kind of made a rebound. You're like, oh my God, hey, it's Bruce. Bruce is in the film. Where before you're kind of like, oh my God, Bruce looks like you sometimes now in hindsight look at him and go, oh my God, how did no one notice that Bruce Willis looks like he may be having a medical event sometimes, what it felt like right in the film. And now that you get to hear all these stories, now we have a little bit, we can now look at it with those eyes and not be just critical of Bruce. We can, when he's bad, we will call it out. But we'll also point out if we think, hey, I think the aphasia is actually peeking through here. Like sometimes you can see him reading cards off screen. Like there are certain times where I think they just tell Bruce, just yell. And so the appeal was to take a look at something and not just do it to make fun of him or fun of them, but to find out why did Bruce take these roles? And now we kind of get an idea of why he took these roles and maybe why he wasn't getting, because we were on a podcast recently talking about Motherless Brooklyn, his last official and he's only in that 5 minutes, Steve, 7 minutes, gets killed early.
Yeah.
And he's not bad in it, but you can tell this is going to be probably a bad analogy, but it's like watching Peyton Manning play football here in America. When his arm was gone, you could tell there was time. Like you could just, sometimes you see these athletes who at one moment they're at the top of their game. And then as they get towards the end, you can see it. And with his aphasia, it was like that. It was like watching this great athlete suddenly just hit the wall and all of the magic and ability it seemed to be like gone. And so it's been it's been a sad journey too. We've had fun doing it, but like Bruce Willis holds a real soft spot for me because Die Hard, like there are movies that Bruce Willis was like that every man's action hero. He's not, not this juiced up guy. Like he made those of us who aren't 6'6" and built like The Rock feel like we could be heroes too. You know what I mean? And that sounds stupid, but like John McClane spoke to us. We were like, wait a minute. We all could be cool. We don't all just have to be like, I'll be back. You know what I mean? We could actually do something. I think that's what was sold to us late 80s, early 90s. And so Bruce Willis is that guy that was the everyman. You believed in him. He was sarcastic. He was funny, but he could also kick ass. And you just, I don't know. So watching him now and now knowing the path that has currently happened to him, where he's almost basically not able to talk anymore, it's sad. It's like watching a family member slip away into dementia. It's we have fun, but it can be very heartbreaking at times watching a shell of your former hero.
Yeah, and that's a shame because talking about Motherless Brooklyn, I read a quote from Edward Norton saying if it wasn't for Bruce Willis, the film wouldn't have got made. So Bruce still had, at that point anyway, he obviously still had his wits about him and was still a player to some extent. Adding his name to that movie clearly helped in a big way. And yet at the same time, he's making these movies, these STD movies. So it's a weird kind of thing going on there where he's still Bruce Willis, yet he can't get these roles anymore. So like Scott says, yeah, sad. As he says, Bruce Willis, I'd go back to Moonlight and I'm that old. I would have been, I guess I was like 14 when Moonlighting started. And that was a point as well where TV sucked. It was all, as we were on another show recently talking about 80s TV. And you talking about Dynasty and Dallas and things like that. So for a 13-year-old kid like me, 14 years, Moonlighting comes along. Bruce Willis is this, no one knew who he was at that point. And he's just this idiot. Like this funny guy who like Scott, an everyman kind of quippy guy who's not a big tough guy. And that kind of moved into the Die Hard thing where you were like, yeah, this guy's, there'd been all this, you had all the Sylvester Stallone, Arnold Schwarzenegger movies and stuff. And they're great. And I love those movies. But Bruce Willis, as Scott said, brought something really relatable, like an everyman vibe that we all were sort of hypnotized by a bit. So, yeah.
That reminds me of when Sean was speaking with Rennie Harlin recently on Reelblend, and you were saying, Sean, about Die Hard 2 being a perfect sequel to the first Die Hard, because in Die Hard 2, you've still got that everyman who is basically he's doing this for family. Okay, he saves everyone else around it, but in Die Hard 2, you got the same thing where it's about his relationship and his family, but he just happens to be saving everybody else around it at the same time. So there's that blue collarness, but also that family man vibe that's in there in the first two films.
Yeah, no, I mean that evolution of John McClane by number 4 and number 5, he's essentially the Terminator. He can't be stopped. I think the moment that franchise legitimately jumped the shark for me, shot up through the water cannon and lands next to Sam Jackson, who miraculously happened to be driving right next to him in the great state of New York, which is massive. And I was like, oh, wow, they stopped caring. This makes me sad because I love that series more than anything else. But yeah, I mean, the guys are exactly right when they talk about Bruce and what made him stand out. A lot of what I explored in this Bruce Willis book that I wrote is how he gets lumped in with the Planet Hollywood guys, how it's Stallone and Schwarzenegger that he quite often runs parallel with and shows up later on in the Expendables movies, obviously. And that's a big component of Bruce's career, without a doubt. But I think that people kind of overlook the chances that he takes in other genres. And he followed in the 90s the sci-fi trend that a lot of the action stars went down. But still, it's funny that you mentioned with Ed Norton, how Norton said, I probably couldn't get Motherless Brooklyn made if not for Bruce. There's countless directors that say that over the course of Willis's career, that if he didn't step up and say, I like the Luc Besson's Fifth Element script, I want to do Looper with Rian Johnson. Rian Johnson wasn't anybody at the time when he did that film, but Tarantino, fine, was red hot on Reservoir Dogs, but like Pulp Fiction, it didn't need Bruce. Bruce very much wanted to be in that movie, but that helped catapult Quentin into another stratosphere. M. Night Shyamalan. No one knew who M. Night was when he did Sixth Sense, and I'm sure several studio executives wanted to get in and interfere with that movie as well too. And Bruce kind of ran interference on him because he was a blue collar guy. Yes, he had that relatability, but what we tend to forget, and I think this is what the guys were sort of saying of how sad it is that he's the last of these massive movie stars that people kind of came to the movies to go see a film because Bruce Willis was in it. But you might not have even known the name of it. And when they talk about their STD movies, you quite even forget the title of it. Who knows what separates Hard Kill from Cosmic Sin from Midnight in the Switchgrass. But, for a very long run, Bruce had identifiable titles and franchises and would shift from comedy to science fiction to action to auteurs to he never really went quite the indie route, but would do character work. I didn't mind starring opposite Paul Newman in Nobody's Fool or something like that just because he wanted it. There's a benefit that comes with he was so highly paid early on in his career that he could be experimental if he wanted to. I don't doubt, and looking over his career, that Hudson Hawk was kind of a turning point in his career. I think he laid bare a lot of the things that he liked about making movies. His humor is very much prevalent in that. It's got the action to the level that he wanted to come at, and the audience so wholeheartedly rejected it that I think he kind of retreated back to the safety of Last Boy Scout and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, Bruce is a fascinating subject in any era of his career, but there is something to be said about these direct-to-video ones towards the end about what they tell us about it. I'm curious what you guys think, Scott and Steve specifically, about is the aphasia the reason that the aphasia is the reason that he's kind of bad in those movies, but I can't quite figure out if the aphasia is the reason he takes these gigs. I don't know why someone on his team didn't step in and say, look, sick or not sick, you're Bruce Willis. What do you do? What are we doing here? Why are we in Georgia shooting 2 days on wrong place? Someone had to interfere.
I've been thinking about this recently. Maybe the demand of the amount of time he would have to be on set was just too much for him.
Mm-hmm.
I think it might be as simple as that.
Mm-hmm.
Look, if you're on this movie for 3 days, you're going to get 3 million and you can go home. The idea of being on set for a month or two, it may just be that simple that he just thought he knew, he knew perhaps that he just wasn't mentally fit enough to deal with it. So it may be that simple, that he's taken these roles because they demand so little of him because of his medical condition. That's
But he
what
still liked working. You think he still enjoyed the process of.
I think. Look, some of these movies so far with us, you're luckier than us because you've seen more of them probably.
Lucky may not be the term.
You guys have the Detective Night trilogy still.
Well, I know. I mean, hey,
we're pumped. We're gonna try to give him the theater.
So
actually.
I think some of them, he's decent and he's fun and he's been the high point of some of them.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes not so much. But I do think a lot of it is that was just too demanding of him mentally to be on set for a long amount of time. That's what I've come up with.
Mm-hmm.
What I read was a couple things. Early on, it's because he had young kids with the second wife, because Demi Moore is his first wife, and I think he's had younger children with her. So I think he knew his career was kind of coming towards an end where, it's like a De Niro. You're going to be in some stuff, but you're going to be in the grand roles now. Like the leading man roles will be few and far between. You might get a couple of cool old man Logan type of roles where you get to play some dusty, like Clint Eastwood's career, right? The old grizzled old man who's just had enough of kids on his lawn. Not going to shoot somebody. But those aren't roles that are out every day in the theater, so those will come and go. So I think he wanted some of that. But then as he gets further, his team did know what it was that I don't know if they knew, but I have read things where they would send notes to the director that he needs less lines. He needs scenes where he's not doing as much. Like he can do an action moment, but he can't do a full action movie sometimes. So those in his camp knew, but I think it might be that ego thing that us men go through where you don't go to the doctors because you don't want the truth that you know. So you're just going to live in that belief of, I'm fine. Don't worry about it. Maybe I take a little bit more. I just need a shot or an extra drink of espresso. I'll be fine. Don't worry about it. I didn't forget that line. I was improving. It's that we don't want to admit that we're not immortal. We're mortals. And that as we get older, we start to lose it. And again, shame on his team, because there is a movie. I don't know the movie, but Alec Baldwin, at least luckily he's not in an Alec Baldwin situation where Baldwin is now under scrutiny for unfortunately killing a cinematographer. That doesn't seem to be his fault. But Bruce, I've read, has fired off a shot when he wasn't supposed to on set 3 times in a row.
Oh, wow.
Did not know. Yeah. So the fact that no one got hurt because of this, but also this Emmett Furla group, they're some scumbags. And they took full advantage of Bruce Willis and his name. And Steve and I are going to eventually get the FBI to launch an investigation to them, because we're pretty sure the amount of money that they're making that they're getting for these films and not making back, some kind of money is being washed somewhere. Somehow they're getting a tax, something that they're able to get 10 million a project almost and barely scrape $1 million back together. And so there's something there. There's just something there. I think there's some scumbags, but unfortunately, Bruce he wanted to check. And I think Steve and I figured 26 in a row. If he gets $1 million a piece, he works maybe because he's in the Detective Night, but maybe he does 3 months of work to make $26 million. Who says no to that in their 60s? It's kind of a,
and you can play the really fun game of this. So funny, fun/sad game.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yep.
You always to the couch everything in this conversation of, yes, it's fun, but also it's very sad.
It
of
is.
like, when Bruce is not in a scene, when it's very clearly a body double who's conducting the other end of a conversation. Obviously, any fight sequence is much younger, bald actor popping up in the thing. But there's one in particular, and I forget which one it is, but it takes place out in the woods, and Bruce is supposed to have the drop on somebody, and it's so clearly shot over the shoulder of another stunt actor. And it's, God, how do these movies even pass as entertainment? For who's sitting down and dialing up these films to pass? And it's, believe me, it's 90 minutes. You're not going over 90 in any way.
Which we are very thankful for a lot of times.
Yes.
If he said 2 hours, we might have quit this after episode 5.
You're a good 87 minutes away from the end credits in most of these cases.
But it is the longest 87 minutes sometimes I've ever felt in my life. Like sometimes, like I've paused, like before we recorded, I was talking about Airstrike. We paused it one time. I thought this has got to be over. Airstrike has 3 endings to it. I was like, this is 90 minutes. I'm like, this thing's still not over. I was only had another 45 to go. I thought, holy, feels like forever. It felt
Well,
like
they're
Pearl Harbor.
enjoyable when there's an actor who comes to play, whether it's Frank Grillo or Christopher Maloney. When those guys show up and are like, I'm going to give this all that I've got. Why not? And then I'm like, oh, this is going to be a story. This is going to be all right. Because Bruce is going to play his version of small town cop, and usually on the phone with somebody. But it's always, can the other people be entertaining? So.
I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur.
And we're from the Spy Hards podcast.
That's right, and you are listening to Pods Like Us, the podcast that also has the Midas touch.
So the book then, Sean, the previous books have been the way that you've gone through the story of Spider-Man in the most recent, from the earliest periods of the film being made with the Nicholas Hammonds all the way up to this. So it's more of a chronological work through. Mm-hmm. But I understand that this one, it's sort of similar, but you're also going film by film as well with it. So it's almost like a filmography. So is it a mix of filmography and biography?
Yeah, so it's not unlike what these guys were talking about with their podcast, is that if you're going to tackle Bruce, you need an angle of some sort because he's been covered to death. So with this book in particular, the Spider-Man one was absolutely a chronology. It was like, we're starting in the 60s, we're going to sort of map how did Hollywood figure out how to tell Spider-Man stories? What lessons did they learn at each stop, from the Raimi movies into the Mark Webb movies into what Marvel's doing now at this point? The Bruce book was also inspired by his retirement announcement. And it was very much, okay, this guy's retiring. He's an actor who I've loved my entire life. Die Hard, I'm the same age as you guys. Essentially, Die Hard is a seminal moment. It's a film that taught me to look at movies in a different way. And I just fell in love with that sort of sarcastic, quippy anti-hero. And I love everything about John McClane. But what I wanted to sort of prove, and then I was rewarded by figuring out that the more you researched into his career, it actually did sort of demonstrate this, is that if this guy's retiring, why is that important? You know, why is this a moment that we should sort of sit up and pay attention to? Because I don't think people have this type of career anymore. I don't think that you have the movie star name above the title. We're going through this time period where IP is really important, and that's what's bringing people into theaters. It wasn't like that in the 80s and 90s when Bruce was running. I don't think, as I kind of mentioned earlier, that he gets enough credit for the different genres that he played around in. And so what I did was I took his whole body of work and I broke them up into genre sections. Like I do an action section, I do a comedy section, I do a science fiction section. I do the sort of work with the auteurs, the directors that he sort of sought out. And then I do the Die Hard franchise as its own section kind of thing. And within each of those, I may jump around from year to year or period to period, but inside of that, I try to talk about how those movies fit into his overall career and his choices, but the industry as a whole too. Was he sort of being tasked into making these decisions? Was he chasing after sort of something that a lot of other people had at the time? His action in particular can be really interesting because he never really had the buddy cop run. I think the closest he came to doing that was Last Boy Scout when he got teamed with Damon Wayans, but then Wayans is like a football player in that movie. He's not even a cop. He did Cop Out with Kevin Smith. I don't even I mention Cop Out, and then I kind of say Kevin Smith doesn't even want me to really discuss this movie, so I'll just leave it out of the book. But Bruce was kind of like the solo guy. He was known for being the lone wolf, and that worked in movies like 16 Blocks, which I think is a terrific film that gets kind of overlooked a bit. I really admire how often he went after working with specific directors, and sometimes it worked really well. I think him with Zemeckis and Death Becomes Her is an out-of-the-box role for him, but then Bonfire of the Vanities with De Palma is a disaster. So he's all over the place, and he's never afraid to me, he's one of these leading men in a time where, you know, The Rock and Jason Statham have to argue about how many punches they can take. Bruce is a guy, as big of a movie star as he is, wasn't afraid to be part of an ensemble if it meant that everybody around him was doing better. And I think the standout scene for him is his cameo in Ocean's 12, where he plays himself, who recognizes Julia Roberts, who's playing Tess, who's pretending to be Julia Roberts in this complete head fuck of a sequence. And Bruce doesn't mind just showing up in the middle of this Oceans movie and being like, yeah, I'm going to play this scene because I think it's hilarious. And I'm really funny and I can nail everything that you need out of this. So I wanted to, in general, celebrate everything that he's accomplished, but try to put it in this loose structure of this might be one of our last great movie stars, and he's probably responsible for some of the biggest movies that you've ever enjoyed in your entire life. When people lump him into the Planet Hollywood group, I'm like, yeah, but tell me that Schwarzenegger could do The Sixth Sense. Like, he just can't. He can't. Like, Bruce had a versatility about him that I don't think enough people celebrate. So,
but I mean, some of the chances that he takes, and people don't look on so well, such as is it Last Man Standing that's based on Yojimbo, for instance.
Yeah.
I can understand completely why he would go for a chance like that, even though it didn't quite work out as they expected to. There's bits about that film and about his role that you can see his reasoning for doing that, because it's such a good project to try and get involved in.
It's Walter Hill. The director is Walter Hill. And so, again, you're exactly right. In hindsight, you can look at a lot of Bruce's projects and say, oh, I get what he was going for here. Like, on paper, this probably made sense, which then, again, speaks to the movies that you guys have tackled with your podcast. It's hard to point at them and say, all right, but what was the ultimate reason why Bruce did this? It's rarely director. It's certainly not script. So it makes you scratch your head and wonder.
So, leading up to doing the book, then, what sort of interview? Because I know you're a good one for getting interviews with people that are involved. Like with the Spider-Man book, you spoke to lots of people. You spoke to Hammond. You spoke to Tobey Maguire. You spoke to all these people to get their stories and then put those together. So, when approaching this, what interviews did you do, and what sort of information did you glean from that?
It's a great question. I actually wanted this book to not be so interview heavy.
Okay.
Because the previous two books wouldn't have worked without certain interviews. Like, they need the Release the Snyder Cut one kind of needed Zack Snyder. And it took a long time to effort getting him to go on record, kind of thing. The Spider-Man one as well, too. It was really difficult to win Sony over and let them know that this wasn't like a hit piece and that this was a celebration of the work. Going into it, I kind of notoriously know that Bruce is like anti-press and he's not going to talk. And then I was kind of circling the idea of a Bruce Willis project before the announcement. Once the announcement came about the aphasia, I was like, I'm never going to get it now at this point. So I needed the book to stand on its own without the reliance of interviews. And so that's what I decided to do, is to do it more of an analysis piece as much as I could, and I'm going to go over these movies. I'm going to try to tell you why I think they're important. I'm going to do a bigger picture, how they fit into the industry. What I did manage to get was directors. I got a number of directors who worked with him, people who've come on the Reelblend podcast before, M. Night and Quentin and Ryan Johnson, and they just talked a bit about working with him, but also kind of specifically the message that all of them wanted to put out there was how influential he was in terms of defending their voice and defending the type of picture that they wanted to make. And how, as a collaborator, if you got him at the script level, if he bought into the project from those early stages, he was going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that you got to tell the type of movie that you wanted to tell. And you can see that in so many of the films that he did. Luc Besson has said that about Fifth Element. Terry Gilliam said it about 12 Monkeys. Gilliam said, "It's crazy that I have studio money to tell this time travel film." And it was only because he got Bruce. And the way that Gilliam says it is that you needed somebody who could give you an opening weekend. That's all the studio care about. They care about the opening weekend, and Bruce delivered opening weekend. And so once they secured Bruce, they were like, yeah, go ahead, go nuts with this movie. And that movie ends up getting Brad Pitt his first Oscar nomination. While we're here, let's also just briefly mention, of all the times, all the projects that Bruce has been in that got other people Oscar nominations,
Yeah.
Pulp Fiction, Sixth Sense, 12 Monkeys, he never gets recognized by the Academy for his acting prowess, and I think that is ridiculous. So
there alone, you've shown the wealth of the variety that he can do as well with the performance. because you've got The Sixth Sense, you've got The 12 Monkeys, that's a completely different part altogether. I mean,
Sure.
And all these other films. So from there, then, what would you say? This is a tricky one. What would you say then, Sean, are your 3 go-to Bruce Willis films?
I mean, Die Hard has to be the first one.
Yeah.
Has to be. I'm going to put 12 Monkeys up there as well, too, because I think it's his best performance. Because he's quiet. He's really quiet in it, and he reacts to everything. He lets Pitt sort of overact and chew the scenery, and he holds that whole thing together. If you guys haven't watched 12 Monkeys from start to finish in a long time, throw it on. But it has to walk this line between, is this guy really crazy, or is he truly from the future? And Bruce sells all of that on his own. Third one's tough. Let's see. I'll do Death Becomes Her, because I do want to represent his comedy. And he does great sort of wacky physical comedy in that. I love that he isn't afraid to be the wallflower and is there to just really set up Meryl and Goldie, who are swinging for the fences in that. So yeah, let's do that. Die Hard, 12 Monkeys, and God, but it could be Unbreakable too. Unbreakable is such a great movie. I don't know. And that's really hard. It changes every day.
I mean,
I want to know the other guys. Scott, Steve, what are your 3?
Well,
I was just going to very quickly say Death Becomes Her. You could almost see that being a direct correlation from how he was with Sybil Shepherd in Moonlighting, because she was almost a similar character as those 2 characters were in a way, and he was reacting to them just as much as he used to react a lot to Sybil Shepherd's character in Moonlighting.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Go on then, Steve.
And that, like, he stole that show from her. That show was set up as a vehicle for her, and it was only that he was like, I'm one of the brightest stars to burst out of the industry at this point. But look how many actors burst out of TV at that time. Tom Hanks was killing it on Bosom Buddies. Saturday Night Live was a machine for turning people into movie stars. Chevy, Bill Murray, Eddie Murphy, all these, like, everyone was sort of leaping from television into movies at that point, and Bruce just rode that wave too.
Steve?
Okay. Without question, Die Hard.
Has to be.
Absolutely. And on our other podcast, Scott, the Christmas one where Scott's attitude, his point was that Die Hard is the ultimate Christmas movie. Obviously, when we did that episode, I'd seen Die Hard so many times. I didn't bother rewatching it for the episode because I'm like, I've seen this movie an embarrassing amount of times. But afterwards, I thought, actually, do you know what? It probably has been about 10 years since I've seen Die Hard. And I watched it again, and not only was I, yes, Scott, you're right.
I will die on that hill. I will die on that hill.
By the time the film had finished, I was like, this might be the best film ever made.
It's up there for sure.
It is so perfectly paced. The action is incredible. It is just relentless. And one of the loudest movies I've ever seen. There are points in the film where there's just so explosions coming from left and center. And this poor everyman is in the middle of it. And no one knows he's there. And it's just, it is literally one of the best movies ever made. The Last Boy Scout, I just love. I mean, Shane Black, Tony Scott. I love a buddy movie anyway. And this is quite an unorthodox one, really, as you pointed out, Sean, that his disgraced detective teams up with a disgraced pro football player. I mean, the intro alone with Billy Blanks shooting someone out on the pitch and the theme song. It's just a bonkers movie.
Yeah.
Cocaine, I'm sure, was in abundance. I don't know. I love the movie because literally every line is a quip in this movie.
Yeah.
Literally every line. Perfect? No, but it's a fun time. And my
Joe Hallenbeck may be the quintessential Bruce character.
Self-loathing to the max.
Yeah.
He's just brilliant. And my number, I mean, Hudson Hawk. I love Hudson Hawk. And I'm not being Mr. Quirky left field. I love this wacky movie that everyone hates. I think this movie is absolutely incredible.
We have a belief that he made that movie so he could just say the line, I guess you won't be attending the hat convention this July. So specific.
Bunny, ball, and the dog go. I mean, there are a million things in that movie that are just. I mean, I know people say the whole "so bad it's good," or in some people's mind, this might be so bad it's just bad. But I happen to the chemistry with Danny Aiello, and this is just an insane movie that I liked at the time, and I wasn't quite prepared for how people were going to tear him down for it. And but as Sean pointed out earlier, it's so Bruce Willis, that film.
Neither was he.
No, he certainly wasn't.
I think he thought he'd get a pass.
I bet, but it's so Bruce Willis, that film. And because I was such a big fan of Moonlighting as well, it was like all his little traits and things coming together. And he thought, people love me, they're going to love this.
I'm Bruno over here.
They
That's
did
what
not.
it was. It's his singing career and his action career.
So he had all
together.
this stuff going on where he was just like sitting on top of the world, and it was just people just were not prepared for it. And I think it's jury appraisal, and I love that movie.
And there's a few in that, like it was Mortal Thoughts was around that time,
right?
With Bonfire of the Vanities. So he was taking a few hits, in the public.
Yeah, definitely.
So,
but they're my three, definitely.
You know how you can have butterfly
Right,
effect
Scott,
from that
you're up.
stuff? My favorite movie of all time is Pulp Fiction. It's not on my list, but if he doesn't make those bad decisions and get crushed, maybe he doesn't do Pulp Fiction. Maybe it doesn't become the vehicle that it ended up being for Tarantino. So sometimes there is a silver lining in the things that don't go well. Sometimes you're like, those failures actually help these successes. For me, as you said, it's Die Hard, number one. You should just turn my mic off and cut me out of this thing if I didn't say Die Hard's number one, because I'm not a real Bruce Willis fan. Because anyone who says yes, Moonlighting, but if you didn't fall in love with John McClane, you're just, I don't know, something's definitely wrong with you if you can't find love for him. The movie that you were jumping between, Sean, I absolutely think his best, as does Mr. Tarantino, I think his best performance and my favorite M. Night Shyamalan movie is Unbreakable. His chemistry with Samuel L. Jackson, that film is so amazing. It is too bad that more DC MCU people don't look at that film and follow its blueprint for how to tell a superhero movie without letting the folks know you're in a superhero origin movie. And Bruce Willis, I think the good and bad for Bruce, kind of like Stallone and maybe Schwarzenegger, is they have these characters that we know them for forever. And he's always going to be John McClane to us. And while many actors wish they could say that they had the one role that everyone always knows, it sometimes is a bit of a crutch, because I think people forget about him in Unbreakable and these other roles because like, oh yeah, John McClane, Die Hard. And you're like, oh, he's more than just John McClane and Die Hard. Don't get me wrong, John McClane, Die Hard, I mean, Mount Rushmore of his characters, but his performance in Unbreakable is just amazing. Then the scene where you think his son might shoot him and we really don't know if he's going to test it. There's part of us in the audience who are like, I hope he does, to see. Just a heartbreaking performance in that film, a great performance in that film. And in the end, you're just, oh man, when that movie ended, I was like, yeah, it was amazing. I was like, and then when people don't like it as much, I'm like, what movie did you see? Were you not watching what's happening? And then for me, I think, there's so many great roles, but for me, another movie that I thought he was scintillating in was Sin City. Yeah. I thought, man, that's in my opinion, Robert Rodriguez's best film he's ever made. That is the hands down greatest graphic novel ever brought to life on screen. And what Bruce brings, getting to tap into this 1940s noir detective with a heart condition, and it just, oh man, there's so many great performances in that, but he sells it. He is so spectacular in that film. But again, now you're making me want to do a podcast where we talk about all these great roles now that we've been watching nothing but the sad parts. But I think what makes it sad, our journey, is because you look back at these films we've talked about and you just go, man, that guy can act. And I think too many times we just think of him as John McClane. I think that's not fair, because he is way more than just John McClane. Sure. So much more than just John McClane.
Well, you've already mentioned two of the films in your choices that I would have chosen. So, I would start with, everyone's got to start with Die Hard. it's
It
always
really
got
does
to always be the one, because not only is it a great film, but it's also, as much as he'd done Blind Date at this point already with Kim Basinger, which is a great film in itself. It's a hilarious film, but the film that made everybody see him as something other than what he was before was Die Hard. Essentially, that's what launched him into the film thing, and for good reason. It's a perfect film. 12 Monkeys I've picked as well, for the fact that you have got that dichotomy there of you're not sure about the character's mentality, whether he is or not, whether he is telling the truth or this, that, and the other. But also something I love about that, and about a lot of the roles that I like seeing him in, is the reactions that he has to the other co-stars with him, such as the Brad Pitt, when he reacts, the way that he reacts to Brad Pitt, and they react to each other. It is a thing that, well, it's just something special. And then my third choice is The Sixth Sense, because I just love that. That is just, I think that's a perfect film. It's also my favorite Shyamalan film as well. I just love that film altogether. We're going to have to rush now because Sean has got an appointment to get off to. But thanks for speaking with us, Sean.
Anytime. It's a pleasure meeting you guys.
Pleasure meeting you as well. I've seen a lot of your stuff.
Good luck with the book. I'll pick it
awesome.
up.
Okay.
Thank you. I can't wait to dive into your catalog of stuff.
And when Tarantino's on again, you ask him why if the show was really the movie.
Which one? What do you mean? What do you want me to ask?
Ask him if the movie critic was really the TV show he announced at our New York City thing and then turned into a movie. You've got the cachet to ask him. I don't. We probably won't come on my show.
I'll try and find out. Thank you, guys.
Great job.
Do you want to let people know how to get in touch with you, Sean, and all about Reelblend and Cinemablend?
Sure, really quick. I'm on cinemablend.com. The podcast is Reelblend, Reelblend. We drop every Friday mornings. And the book, Bruce Willis, arrives on shelves on June 11th. You can get it any place that all your book needs are met. So
that's August the 16th in the
Good luck with the book,
by the way.
Yes.
Thank you, boys. Really appreciate it. Good talking to you. Take care.
Yippee-ki-yay.
Thank you, Sean. Okay, so yeah, my third pick was The Sixth Sense, obviously. So now going to this chat between just the three of us then. So have we already looked at what the introduction to podcasting was and how both of you were introduced to the world of podcast?
Steve, why don't you go first, since you kind of were doing something earlier?
Yeah, so I was involved in, excuse me, I was involved in internet radio for about 10 years. And the difference with that was 90% editing, 10% vocals for myself. So my job was literally to just introduce music. And then the rest would be literally just 90% editing of the whole show together. So I did that for 10 years. And then because it was music-based, Spotify came along and made what I was doing feel kind of redundant, because people now had the history of music at their fingertips. So what happened was the demise of my podcasting or internet radio career kind of coincided with I'd stopped doing that, missed it terribly, and I was now just a listener. And being a huge movie lover, I was just listening to movie podcasts. And one of them was a show called Watch This or Die,
Yeah.
Which was, what freaked me out about it was every week, every 2 weeks, whatever they do a show, it would just be one of my favorite films. And they talk about The Rover or Brooklyn's Finest. And I was like, Jesus Christ, this is crazy. They're picking like real great movies here. So I reached out to to the show, and that was Scott's show. And I genuinely thought, God, I'd love to, I don't know if I'd love to do a show, because I didn't think I could do it on my own. I didn't feel confident that I could just start a podcast. And I didn't really have an idea. You need that idea, that formula for the idea. And so I was always a bit like, I don't know if I've got any ideas. And so I was just a listener, and I reached out to Scott and said, I love your show. and then I'll let Scott take over, really. Because I just used to message him and say, like, great episode, you've got great taste in films, and I love listening to the show. So that was the first part, but I'll let
He asked
Scott
if he
take
could rub
over.
my bald head.
So he stalked you then until he got on the show.
Basically, it was like he would send me head lotions. I'm like, whoa, what's this all about, friend? So I had wanted to get into podcasting, but like I said earlier, the original assumption was you had to have all this equipment or you had to be in a studio type. And I was like, well, how the fuck I can afford that? That's not a realistic thing. But then a site called Anchor was out, which is now owned by Spotify. And when that came out, a buddy of mine that I was working with at we'll call it the fruit stand. You can put together what the retail that might sell watches, phones, and tablets we worked at. We were huge movie fans and we really had a good rapport there. And so we're like, we should do a podcast. So we started a podcast 2 weeks before the COVID shutdown. So I had no idea COVID's coming. And we called it Nobody Puts Nick in a Cage. And we wanted to do Nicolas Cage because I'm a huge Tarantino fan, and I was under the assumption that Tarantino has been covered 1,000 times. Did I do the research on that? Absolutely not. Because if I had, I would have found out that no one was doing him, and I would have found out that Nicolas Cage is covered by everyone and their mother. So we jump into that arena. We overdo it. We do 2 movies every 2 weeks, and they're like 3.5-hour podcasts. I don't know what the hell we're thinking. I think we were like, we're going to jump. We're doing the Olympic high dive instead of working our way up. We just said we're going to the Olympics. And so we burned ourselves out, but then we simplified it. Like, let's do a weekly podcast where we give 5 reasons you should watch this movie basically before you die, kind of thing. You watch it and then you can die happy, kind of thing. And so we did it for over a year, and Steve was one of the few people who actually reached out to us. And at one point we joked about, like, are you guys breaking into my house to see my movies? I said, yeah, tell your mom we need some more tea or something. Like, we had these little nice banters back and forth online. And then my buddy, his girlfriend at the time, got pregnant with his second son, and he was going to not have as much time. So the show had to come to an end. And I was kind of at a loss. What am I going to do? I really enjoyed, this is my favorite thing to talk about, is talk about films, whatever they may be. Yeah. And so my wife kind of was like, why don't you do Tarantino? I said, well, you know what? I'm going to research to see how many are out there. And I could not believe that there have been shows that had either had him on as a guest or had done like maybe a 9-film retrospective of him, but just cover the 9 films and that was it. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to go all in on this. So I started the Church of Tarantino, and I needed a first guest to talk about Reservoir Dogs. And I reached out to Steve, and he said, that's my favorite Tarantino movie. So he was my first guest. And then my 3rd month, we were doing Natural Born Killers, and not a lot of people wanted to talk about it. And Steve was like, I love Natural Killers. So he came on again. He's been on that show like 12 times. So he was like a reoccurring guest, and we had such a good rapport and so much fun doing it. That's when the idea of dropping a Bruce came up. But then aphasia sets in, and so it's okay. We got to step. I just feels really in poor taste, but we still wanted to do something. So we came up with the Cheeky Bastards, where originally we were just like talking or giving our maybe unpopular opinions. Like one of my first ones was like, I think that Goodfellas is a better movie than Godfather, or a more rewatchable movie than Godfather. And then he would have something about Hudson Hawk. Like we had these little things where we did unpopular opinions. But we kind of run out of those quickly. You know what I mean? After a while, then it starts to come up. Do we believe these things? Or are we just trying to find things that can kind of like move the needle a bit? So we realized we were really enjoying talking like about action movies. So we kind of pivoted. We kept similar the name, but we called it the Cheeky Bastards Are the Men of Action. And now we pit 2 action movies against each other. And in a retrospective look back, a reappraisal, and then a fun arbitrary, which had the better this or better that. Nothing too serious, but we have a good time really having fun, reminiscing about these films. And then 6 months into that, we said, it's been a year. Let's do it. Because that was when my Christmas episode came out about Die Hard. And we were kind of like, and he did Hudson Hawk. I was like, we should redo that. What do you think? And he was like, yeah, let's give it a shot. So then Dropping a Bruce was also born. So that's how the 2 of us are now on 2 shows. And the one we thought was going to be a labor of love, being Dropping Bruce, is now Steve's on our last show. He's become a job. And I said, yeah, the one that we volunteered to do. So it's been it's just a lot of legwork, because they're hard movies sometimes to get through, but there is a small air of like accomplishment or pride knowing that we are actually genuinely going through these films and having fun talking about them, but we are doing it, as Steve said, in a loving way. Like, we're being very honest. Like, if Bruce looks like he's done a bad job or taking the money, we call it a deuce. He dropped a deuce. But if he's actually looks like he's working at it with knowing the aphasia, knowing what the movie is and what script, if there is any, that he's been given to do. We are very, we'll say he dropped a Bruce. So we try to keep it very fun and light, but we also do not try to be just like lip service to that Bruce. Everything he does, he touches his gold, and everything about this is great because he got aphasia. But we try to point out we think aphasia is peeking through here. We can see it in this. We point out the scenes, and we always tell everybody we're appraising these based on we've watched every movie. There's a movie, what's it called, Steve? What am I blanking? With Paul Gosser, one of our favorite ones from season 1. Came out of blue.
Precious Cargo.
Precious Cargo. Now, Precious Cargo on its own is probably a dog movie, but at that time we'd seen 3 or 4 awful movies, and this was just a fun movie. This guy named Daniel Bernhardt's in it. He has some great lines. We just, it's like, what'd you say? Was it you saying, Steve, like a bad, so bad it's good? It was like, it's such a bad movie, it's good. It's kind of one of those like enjoyable laugh fests.
Yeah, and every film has got, the film may suck, but Bruce might be good. So there's always that possibility that it wins out anyway, or vice versa. Bruce sucked in this movie, but there were other elements that elevated it. So there's always some fun to be had. And like you say, we're doing this in a loving way. We're not just hitting on Bruce Willis's straight to disc movies and that's it. Because that's a bit why listen?
Yeah.
See, this is the thing. Talking about podcasting and all this is, I just got a little bit sick as well of people not being willing to on a movie. Okay. Yeah. Now, if you do a podcast where you just review a movie every week and you say, but I'm not going to talk about the films I don't like, then why am I listening to your show? Because I already know you like everything you talk about.
Yeah.
So you need that kind of, I think what we do is what a lot of people aren't doing. And that is, you know what? I went to see so-and-so movie and I thought that was dog. You just don't hear that anymore. And I mean, we do it I think we do it in a more sophisticated way than that.
Somewhat.
But ultimately what I'm saying is there is a particular, I'm not going to mention any names, but there's a guy on YouTube and he says this openly that I'm not going to talk about the films I don't like. Then I don't need to watch your show because I can look at what film you're talking about. He's going to talk about Furiosa. He's going to talk about the new Dune movie. He's going to talk about the Kingdom of the Apes. But by reviewing them, I know he likes them.
Yep.
So it's done. You've just saved me 20 minutes. Whereas we tend to mix it up a little bit. So you don't know what I'm going to say about Furiosa. You don't know what Scott's going to say about Kingdom of the Apes. He might come out and yell about how awful it was. We've
had arguments on the show.
And we have arguments, heated arguments on the show. And that's reality. Film criticism shouldn't be dead. You just loving everything that's no way to be.
But when it comes to shows that discuss film anyway, I've always found those the more interesting, where if you've got people that have differing opinions, and some people think a great film to some people is a pile of crap to other people, that's where it's interesting, is because then you get the different opinions, and then you can base your opinion around whether you go and see this film or not, around all this constructive debate that there's been about it, rather than every single person say, oh, that film's a classic, this film's a classic, this film's a classic. Yeah, I like it.
Ultimately, it's subjective, isn't it? It's not about having an opinion, it's about having an informed opinion, isn't it? Mm-hmm. Anyone can say a film's dog, but...
And when we did that as our first kind of thing where I said that Heat's not a classic because its ending sucked, I went through and made sure I pointed out all these little things of where I think Michael Mann failed the end of that film. And we talked about it. It wasn't just like the movie sucked and that's it. Anyone can say that. Anyone can go, oh, that movie's garbage. It's dog. It's easy to just say it's garbage. But if you can actually point out flaws, you can at least, Steve can disagree with me I don't remember if he did or didn't on the ending of Heat. And I have a buddy who at first hated me for pointing it out because now you can't see past it now. So I've ruined it for him. But as long as I've given you examples of why this is a problem and you can look at it, then you can go, you know what? I see what you're saying, but it doesn't bother me. I don't agree. And that's fine. But me just going, hey, that movie sucks. Why? Explain to us. You got to give us a reason why it's good or it's bad. Not just say, oh, I love it. Okay. Why do you love it? I just do. You're not. And like Steve says, there's a couple of people I follow and I will not mention names because I'm not we're not famous enough, and they're not famous enough to get us the kind of press we need anyway. So, but it is like everything that comes out, Marvel, everything that ever hits the screen. Oh, it's amazing. It's like, no, it's not. Like what you're talking about. And I'm nice, so I won't go on their site and go, dude, come on, this thing is garbage. What's garbage? Why are you pretending to give this lip service? That's why I think what we do we don't get sponsorship and we don't make money. So I think what it does is it frees us to not have to worry about, are we going to offend people or offend people who want us to push a movie here or there, where we can just go, hey, no, this is why we think it. But in the same respect, go and see it for yourself. Like we say that about all these movies, like we think this is garbage. But before you say it's garbage, make sure you're doing the journey we're doing, so you also understand why when we say Precious Cargo, we enjoyed, it's because we've watched 7 films before this that were dog, and this thing gave us something that we enjoyed. It was funny. There was funny lines. There was ridiculous action. We enjoyed it. So that's why we don't compare them to Die Hard, because that's unfair. And we're comparing B movies. We're watching B movies. We know we're watching B movies. And that's another thing a lot of people don't do this, I think, in the podcast community is, or even the film community, is they don't understand the movie they're going to see and what it is. If you're going to a horror movie and it's in February, it's going to be a possession movie or a jump scare movie. If you enjoy those, by all means, go to them. But they're not going to suddenly move the needle like an Exorcist or a Hereditary or a Shining. But in the same respect, when you're in a summer movie like The Fall Guy, you got to expect it to be a fun popcorn, enjoyable sit down, and hey, that was a fun time to stay in the air conditioning kind of movie, as opposed to being like, that was not Casablanca. Too many people want everything to be this artsy, going to be on Criterion. It's got to have A24 vibe stuff, when they miss out on some of these enjoyable movies that are just fun to watch. Like maybe they're not from the 80s. Like we've watched so much in the 80s. We watched so many bizarre movies in the 80s that I think we just have this appreciation of knowing that, oh yeah, this is a crappy movie, but oh, look at this. It's got this weird clown that farts glass or something, like some weird, this is hilarious. I love this. But now people are like, that wasn't very, I don't know if I believed his transition. It's like, come on, know the movie you're going to and enjoy it for what it is. It's like restaurants, right? If you go to a fast food restaurant, you're not expecting 5-course meal, right? Like you're not expecting a 5-star steak. If you get steak quesadillas at Taco Bell, you're not expecting them to be filet mignon from the finest butcher in Italy. All right. So we all know what we're getting into. So we need to treat our movies just like that. Some are fast food, some are fine dining. To each, there is a great thing to them.
Yep. Taco Bell is definitely fast food.
It's fast.
Yeah, it's fast. You need to send me a link to that episode that you're on about, because I want to hear what you said about Heat, because I haven't seen Heat in over 20 years.
Oh, no. Well, I hope I don't ruin it for you.
And I did love that film, I will say. I mean, there's bits I remember about it that I love. And I think, if I remember rightly, there was something I didn't particularly like about the ending, but I want to have a listen to your episode to find out if
you might be in for a surprise. I think I disliked it more than Scott in the end, and he didn't expect it. But you'll find out.
This is Mac Jackson from the Forever Adventure Network, the home of the MacGyver podcast, the Never Gets Old podcast, and the MacGyver SG-1 audio series. And you're listening to Pods Like Us.
But I mean, going on another tangent there with that one, with Heat. Actually, first of all, do you prefer Heat, or do you think LA Takedown is the better film?
I haven't seen LA Takedown, I must say.
Scott,
but, I know LA Takedown. It's kind of like the Heat remade it. Look, I may not like the ending of Heat, so I may not like the last 20 minutes, but the other 120, I absolutely love it. So I don't want your listeners to think this guy's an asshole. He doesn't like Heat. I absolutely do love Heat, and when you listen to that episode, you understand why it upsets me, because he just absolutely does not stick the landing for the ending of this film. Like, of all the way movies are made, everything's in the script to set up to end a certain way, and they've Hollywood it. And I hate that. He did the same in Collateral, another movie I love to the ending. And Michael Mann has a penance for doing that for some of his big movies. But no, I mean, that bank robbery scene, that alone, that doesn't get your blood pressure up and the chills on the back of your neck and then that's all production audio, because they were trying to figure out how we're going to do the gunshots. And Michael Mann said, we're going to film this live. So all of that is the blank firing weapons and them yelling. And what a goddamn scene. Like, that is just an intense action. I mean, the only other action scene that I had that visceral reaction to came a couple years after Heat, which would have been the first 20 minutes of Saving Private Ryan when they land on the beach. Like, it's just, I mean, you're just thrown into it as an audience, and I love that you're stuck. You can't leave. Like, doesn't matter. You can only close your eyes if you don't want to see this anymore. You have to go through it with our characters, and you don't know what's going to happen, and there's real stakes, and you are just like on the edge of your seat the entire time, and it is just gorgeous action. John Wick has got cool action, but it's stylized. This is just, I mean, if you would have put some filter on that and put it out nowadays, that we just caught this bank robbery in LA, there'd be people who might be like, if you could just cut out the faces of some of the characters, you'd be like, is that a real bank robbery? Like, you could really fool people, because that's how good the production of it is. It's spectacular. So yes, sorry, long way to say, hey, yeah, I do like Heat. I could have just said that.
Also think it's one of Val Kilmer's best roles.
Oh, he's so good in that too. Yes. Yes. Oh, especially after he gets shot and the way that whole ending, it's so good. Although they're making Heat 2 off this book.
I've heard that, yeah.
And I've heard that Austin Butler is playing young Val Kilmer in the beginning of Heat. So I don't know what they're going to do because the book is broken up into a prequel sequel.
So Adam Driver's De Niro's character.
Is that what's been announced?
I think that was the last thing I heard, but I don't know about Pacino.
Yeah, because I think it's like 1980s they start. And
I'm
then
not sure if Pacino's in the. I don't know why he would be in the earlier stage.
No, he shouldn't. Yeah, they should know nothing about each other in theory. I mean, unless they want to talk about his earlier career and like those two don't intersect.
Yeah,
you know
that's the only way that would make sense.
It's the only way it makes sense. Yeah.
So going back to the subject of point, although saying that, you were mentioning the Nicolas Cage earlier on.
Yes.
And
I love him.
I'm interested in, they made an announcement, didn't they? Although, can you believe it or not believe it? They're actually doing a Nicolas Cage live action Spider-Man Noir.
Spider-Man Noir, yes.
I love that character.
I love Nicolas Cage. So I will watch anything he is in. I said in that podcast, and I think this is one of the genesis of why we did Bruce Willis, because I had been because Nicolas Cage did similar movies that Bruce did because he had a huge IRS tax debt. And the man loved to buy. He loves to buy the craziest in the world. He's got a pyramid for a burial site in New Orleans. He's eccentric. And you see it in his work because he's great. But I've always felt that Nicolas Cage, no matter what movie he's in, he's the best part of the movie. For the most part, he's almost always the best part. And people will give him a hard time because they see he's overacting, he's doing cage rages. And I always like to point out that normally the reason you feel that way is because if you watch the movie and you separate yourself from Nicolas Cage and watch the other actors, half of them aren't doing a goddamn thing. They're not even in the movie. They're just like, they're the ones getting the paycheck. Nicolas is performing. Like he is invested in whatever stupid character he's been hired to play. He is going to be this person. He's going to do an eccentric twist to it. He's going to have fun with the character. He's going to make this character work. And everyone else is just snoozing through the film. And so that kind of made their genesis for us to do Bruce. We wanted to see if there was a similar feel to it. Is Bruce the best part of these films, or is he sleepwalking through it? So anything Nicolas Cage is in, to include that Netflix series where he talked about the history of swear words, I'm hoping for a season 2. I thought it was great. Hearing Nicolas Cage say all these swear words.
Well, if you want to, you talk about Nicolas Cage, look at the films. If you want to make a laughing stock of Nicolas Cage because of the stuff, look at the stuff he's doing now.
Oh, it's amazing.
I don't know if you've seen Arcadian, which is an amazing film, and Pig, Mandy, all this stuff he's doing.
Long Legs looks really good. He looks
as hell. So
yeah.
So you can look down on some of the stuff he was doing to pay his debts, but look at the choices he's making now. He's an artist, this guy.
And he's one of the last few. Like him and Willem Dafoe seem to be like those last two guys who are willing to do just about anything and act in anything you want them to do. There's nothing that is off the table for them. They will bring something to you. So if they aren't the first two guys you think about putting in a film, especially if you're doing something that's you want to be avant-garde or test the waters, if they're not the first two guys you think of, then I don't know. But they're not going to be around much longer. Who's replacing some? Like we talked about Bruce. Who's replacing these people? who are the guys that they're going to go to? Like, we're running out of the actors. Like,
Yeah,
we've got the DiCaprio's and the Pitts, but they're getting up there too. Like,
when you start losing these maverick guys,
who we got left?
That's the scary thing, is who's going to replace him.
I mean, Adam Driver, maybe the next, and Austin Butler. Those guys have got to. They're building up their creds, but like, it's just the plethora of these actors are going away. The mainstay movie stars, as Sean said, the box office draws, they're going away. We're losing them. Like, they're going to eventually age out or pass on. And who's filling these roles? Because since the dawn of Hollywood, we've had these great actors and actresses step at the next wave, the next wave, the next wave. I'm just wondering where the next wave is. We got a few young ones. So I don't want to say we don't, but the amount of them doesn't seem to be there. The ones willing to do a lot of, especially in the male side, I would say, we've got a lot of great female actresses who are willing to really go above and beyond. But some of the male actors, who are our next male leads that we're all going to go rush to the box office and see? Who's our next John McClane? Who's our next Rambo? Who's our next these guys? I don't know.
Thing is, though, what you were saying then with the John McClane and the Rambo and that goes to something else that I've worried about as well, because there's a discussion going around here and there where people have said that we're slowly losing that star quality, that star thing. You have this person, and that's a big pull for an audience, and it's being replaced by franchise instead. So you've got the Marvels, you've got this. Sorry, I'm wearing a Marvel top.
Hey, but, you love what you love.
But there is that danger that it becomes all about the franchise, and we're slowly, I hate to say it, eventually the Tom Cruise, he'll be gone as well at some point eventually. Yeah. And all these people that have that power to bring in an audience. And I worry about that these younger people, like the Butlers and the Chalamets and all these people, that they haven't probably got that same sort of thing to bring an audience in, because film has changed almost in a sense. The industry has anyway. Film itself hasn't.
I think we might be we're on that ground at the moment where we're seeing this. We're seeing like who's going to replace these guys. But at the same time, look, Hollywood needs these guys. They'll find these guys. I mean, who's that guy? That Glenn Powell who was in Top Gun Maverick?
He's really
he's in the new Twister movie. He's in a movie with Richard Linklater, and I heard a rumor that he's going to be in the remake of The Running Man.
Yes,
I think Edgar Wright's doing that, but then I heard Edgar Wright's remaking Barbarella, so I don't know if that's.
I hope he does The Running Man, because we've talked about that. I want to see the person, The Running Man.
So
Barbarella is an interesting one.
That is, but
With
so
Sweeney, I think Sweeney's tapped for that.
Yeah. I think you're right. So I think these guys are there. Someone like Austin Butler, he's in the pretty early stages of his career.
Yeah,
Elvis blew up, and they've got what's that movie? The Bike Riders, or
but it's called Bike Riders. It
is called Bike with Tom Hardy. Tom Hardy. I mean, we're going to have a new James Bond soon. So these guys will come along, but we're in that transitional moment right now where we can't, because someone like Timothy Chalamet he's very much a type, isn't he?
Yeah.
Potentially a new, dare I say, Johnny Depp type. He's got a quirky
100%. Yeah, he's taking some. He's definitely taking some risk early in his career.
Yeah.
As well.
So I think we're in a transitional period right now where we can't see it.
Yeah.
I'm sure Hollywood, the big cats, they know they got to find some replacements.
To touch on your point of the franchises, I think the problem is franchises just don't know when to say when, or they don't have their plan after a certain point. So with your Marvel, I've said it on our show, and this is one of my episodes. I said that the Marvel universe is dead the minute that Tony Stark snapped his fingers and said, "I am Iron Man." They had a 10-year plan. And to their credit, there is no franchise out there that has done what they did with as many films, with as many subjects, to be able to bring it together in such a climactic, unbelievable way, where it paid off with things that were movies earlier. A line of being laughing like, "On your left, ha ha ha," as Captain America constantly passes Falcon because he just outruns because he's got super speed, to that being reused when they reappear after the snap that Hulk did to bring them back. That's an emotional staple. but they had nothing. And maybe because Chadwick Boseman passed, and that's a tragic loss, because Black Panther was going to be a franchise unto itself. And losing him, not just for the franchise, he's an amazing actor. To lose him at such a young age it's really a hit to Hollywood. But they have no one to lead. No one cares about what's going on. So everyone's excited about bringing in the X-Men and Deadpool because those are fun. The Marvel Universe after the big boys left, no one cares about. It's just there's no excitement. There's no fervor for it. No one cares. And they should have walked away. Star Wars did something like this. When J.J. Abrams took the first one on, I really enjoyed The Force Awakens. But then you give it to two other guys. There's no succinct storyline. So now you have three movies that are tied together that don't tie together because as much as I like Rian Johnson, J.J. Abrams had given a blueprint in the second movie. He did some cool stuff with it, but he said, this blueprint, I'm doing it this way, which then forces J.J. Abrams to now pick it up at the end because the other guy got fired because he had a bad movie. And then he has to try to tie it together. And then people are like, well, it didn't make sense. Well, because they never wrote. Lucas knew what episode 1 to episode or 4 to 6 was going to be. He knew what those were going to be. He knew 1 to 3. This one was just kind of like by committee. And so when you don't know, like George Miller is doing a great job with kind of breaking away from Mad Max with telling other stories in that world. He's still the sole voice in his own universe. And he realizes, look, I can't keep telling Mad Max stories because at this point, Tom Hardy was okay, but everyone wants Mel. So let me tell some other cool stories because this is a world of like insanity that has so many abilities in it. So when these franchises are okay as long as we know when to say when. For me, Matt Vaughn's 3 movies that he did in the Apes stories, spectacular. The latest one is not bad, but it's not the same, and you can tell. And sometimes I think we just need to go, you know what? Hey, hang our hats on these 3 amazing movies. What else stories can we tell? We don't have to retell every goddamn story or have 27 in movies coming out at the same time of the same stuff over and over again. After a while, we just get beat down. We get exhausted from it. We lose our fervor. So you have to give us something. If you're going to do franchises, you got to give us something. Die Hard, great example. 3 was the end. Should have ended at 3. Yeah. 4 and 5 especially. 5 should have been a direct-to-video release. That's an STD. That thing is terrible. And Bruce mails it all the way in. The entire movie, he barely could care less. He gave more performance in a Die Hard battery commercial that he did for here in America playing John McClane that he did in that movie. So like you can beat things to death. Steve and I are going to talk about Rambo, and we love Rambo 4. And that should have ended at Rambo 4. Because Rambo 5
definitely
is terrible.
Like I said, that Rambo 5, I think, was just a standalone action movie that wasn't going to work. So they just named him John Rambo to try and bring some money in. And I think this is the problem, though, is there's too much money at risk to take chances right now. Not right now, but over the last, say, 10 years. There's just been too much money at risk. They just haven't got the ideas, and they're not willing to take the chances, and it's cost them greatly. I mean, Marvel is failing terribly, as is Star Wars, and they're Disney's cash machines, but the cash machine's running out, and I don't know what they're going to do because they can't keep churning it out because that will end up bit them on the arse already. Both franchises, if you will. So I'm quite enjoying it. I like to see I like to see these greedy fucks lose money, okay? Because I'm not.
Don't hold back.
Listen, I loved Star Wars when I was a kid, the original trilogy. After that, I couldn't care less. Marvel, I can take or leave. And they've been trying to shove this down my throat for the last 15 years. I couldn't care less. And all I think is the amount of smaller budgeted original movies that didn't get made because they were just siphoning money into this, what I consider garbage now. There are Marvel movies I saw and quite enjoyed. Don't get me wrong. I'm not being that guy either. Iron Man, pretty great standalone movie, I think. Some of the Avengers stuff, that's eye candy. That's huge. I get it. I get the spectacle. But there's been a massive sacrifice, and what we're now suffering is cinema attendance is way down but for everything at the moment. The opening weekend thing and all that is where films like Furiosa, they might not do that well. I'm not talking about the film itself being any good. That's not what I'm saying. That's not really relevant. But I do think cinema attendance is way down. And I think it's because people are just not willing to part with the cash because they're sick of getting the same old all the time.
Yeah.
So we're in a weird time right now. But I'm glad to see these big cats losing money. I'm sorry, that's just the way I feel.
But I mean, for that subject, you've got something like Shawshank, which did rubbish at the cinema, but a superb film, fantastic film. You know,
it happens. Like I say,
after.
I'm saying about Furiosa.
Yeah.
I read something today. That's the only reason I bring it up is that that the Fall Guy, which should have been a surefire sort of directed by the guy who did Bullet Train and that whole gang of stuntmen, director types from the John Wick movies. You've got Ryan Gosling, Emily Blunt, underperformed.
Really fun movie.
Again, I'm not talking about
it really is.
Again, I'm not talking about the film itself. It's just people just aren't parting with the cash, and I don't know if there's a way back. I don't know how they're going to do it. Man, Marvel and Star Wars is not going to do it.
So back to your show then. So recording
so I just
and
shout
editing
on the
then.
entire Hollywood industry there
That's
for
fine.
the last 5 minutes.
And sidetracked your show completely.
I do it a lot.
I do that. I do go off on a tangent a lot. It's one of my many flaws.
Yeah, I think Hollywood and the film industry has been, especially with cinema, has been in a problem area ever since the lockdown, and before then even. But the lockdown just rushed it on, and studios only wanted to put blockbusters and big stupid films that they think are going to make ridiculous amounts of money, and then they've realised that it was all crap, and they need to just put out all sorts of films.
We need another 90s. We need another 90s independent renaissance. Is what we need.
We really do.
Probably
Unfortunately, all the independent film companies of the 90s got bought out by the corporates.
This is what I'm saying.
That's why the place I recorded on Anchor is now owned by Spotify.
Yeah, exactly.
Greedy cocksuckers.
So recording and editing then, is it done remotely like we're doing now?
Yes, I do it. Yes. I mean, he lives in England. I live in New York. We're 5 hours apart. But yeah, we make it work. We record on like Sundays. We make it work. It works really well, actually.
To be honest with you, I guested on Scott's Tarantino episode.
Yeah.
And I'd heard Watch This or Die. And just to be humble, he does such a good job. I couldn't have done it as good as him. I couldn't have done it the way he did it. And he does it so professionally that I'm just like, because he was sort of like, do you want me to do this? He was fairly, and I was like, man, you do such a good job. I can't do that. I don't know how he does it, quite frankly.
It's the nicest thing he's ever said about me. Mostly it's this fucker.
I don't like to compliment this arsehole. But
no, he's going to throw up in about 3 seconds. We have to mute the hell out of this.
No, it's absolutely true. When I listen to like how he put the stuff together, I'm just like, so he's the guy to talk to about the sort of technical and the edit and stuff, because he does an amazing job.
Yeah. He does all the work behind the scenes, and you just come and show up. And
I just talk and get on his nerves.
Which is
something I excel at.
You both excel at research.
Yes, I mean we try to. I mean we do want to sound somewhat intelligent in what we're talking about, and we're jackasses too. We want to have a fun element. We really want this to be just basically him and I having a fun conversation. And I think the best advice I've ever given and been given is it comes from Tarantino. He says, make movies for yourself. Don't worry about the audience. You're never going to make them happy. If you like what you've done, the rest of them. And that's how I feel about our show is if Steve and I have a good time recording and we've had fun, if no one listens and they think we're idiots, I don't care. We had a blast. And it was a good fun 2 hours. We got to sit together and just talk and be absolutely ridiculous, but also have a real fun look back at the different things we do. And that's fun. It's like the scene in, I'm a movie person, so I always bring it back to a scene, but in True Romance, when the end of the 3 movies, they go outside and Clarence, she says, do you want to get some pie? I like to get pie after I watch a film. And I feel like this is that get pie after film. We talk about it. We just have fun talking about it because it's a geek thing to do. We just enjoy it and it's fun. Whether we love it or we hate it, it's just a fun time. And so, yeah, I mean, we love to do it. So recording is easy, and the editing, there's the things we've had to cut out. But,
like Scott says, look, if we're not having a good time, I'd question whether anyone else would have a good time listening. So we always make it fun. We always have a good time. We've got a little in jokes and stuff. Research is something we both enjoy, and there's always something. What I like about dropping a Bruce and the Cheeky Bastards podcast is we don't necessarily know what each other are going to say. So we don't sit down for an hour before and map things out. Okay.
Yep. We have a structure, but we don't. There's no script. It's just go.
There's a structure and a formula, but I don't want to know what Scott thought of that Bruce Willis movie. And when Scott's talking about whatever film is up, whether it's Rambo, Cobra, Roadhouse, whatever, I don't want to know right now what he thinks of it. I want to know while we're talking about it. So there's always an air of spontaneity about it. And that's what's fun. But ultimately, yeah, we do it for ourselves and we have a blast. We're laughing our asses off in the show, and and I love doing it, and that's the best part of my week or whatever. And like I say, we're having a blast, and hopefully you'll have a giggle.
Whoever listens to this too.
Yeah, hopefully you're having a giggle too yourself.
I mean, you brought up STD, and I forgot we said that in the first season until you reminded me and made me giggle. I was like, oh, that's right, I did say STDs.
Yeah, so yeah, that's just that thing. We're having a blast, we're having a laugh, and we hope people do too, because ultimately life's just tough enough as it is. Just click play, 90 minutes, you'll have some fun.
Yeah. So you never do, while you're watching one of these films to research it and get ready, you'll never message each other and one of you suddenly not suddenly say, oh man, this is a real crock.
We'll say we say a few things, especially when we feel like, obviously I'm a huge Tarantino fan in case I haven't said them enough, but like there are a couple of movies we watched, like they've stolen things directly from the movies, and I'll be like, did this motherfucker just, we'll send little notes, but we won't tell how we feel, like, because at the end we decide if it's a Bruce or a Deuce, his acting job and the film. And so we never know. And there's times where there have been times I've been one way, and through the talk I've changed my mind, like mostly about Bruce's role, never really about the movie. Usually I'm pretty know how the movie's going to be. But yeah, we send little messages about, like, have you watched what's it called yet? Or, oh boy, you're in for a slog and this and that. But we don't give away anything but that. It's just kind of like a little fun tongue in cheek or this and that. Or one time he knew something was coming up and he was just waiting for me to text him when I got to the scene where in Airstrike, they basically steal, or they try to steal, the gold watch speech, because Bruce Willis is now the one delivering it in this movie. And I was like, did they just try to steal a gold watch? And he goes, I was waiting for you to text me. So yeah, we have some fun back and forth, but we try to keep everything as far as what we're going to officially say until we get to there. It is fun to have that. It's like if we meet you for the first time and we meet outside of the theater and we get done watching the movie, and we can talk about that movie we just saw. I have no idea how you've thought about it or how he's thought about it. Now we're going to have that discussion. We kind of like to have that feel as if we've just got out of the theater and now we can talk, because we can't talk in the theater. We can say, man, that was great. Or my God, that was dog. What the hell are we watching?
It's like you were saying when you did the second episode, and you were talking about Setup from 2011, and in there you pointed out that there's this sequence that is a direct rip from Heat, the gunfight or the shooting after the robbery in Heat, and you were saying it just came out of there for nowhere. It's like they just wanted to put that in the film.
100% they did
in the film.
It made no sense for that entire shootout. Like none of the things that have happened in some of these films happen. And a fun thing is because he's been on my Tarantino one, is one of the things I did season 2 was try to show the influences and decide if Tarantino truly steals or if he's a big reference guy. Yeah. Because everyone just says it's just copy and paste, copy and paste. Yeah. And our Bruce Willis journey has proved that copy and paste is not as easy as everyone says it is, because there is no point in some of the movies when we watch them, we're like, why did any of these things just happen? Like a lot of it's plot service. I would like to have these scenes in this film. How do we make these scenes happen? Let's just have this happen. And you're like, all right, I guess we're going to do that. Because when you talk about setup, like they pull up in the middle of this road and they get out and they just start shooting, cause a scene so they can then assassinate a guy and get a case or whatever. And then like, it's all over the place. And you're kind of like, what the fuck is going on? And you know that they're getting it from these movies, but they do such a poor job. There have been times Steve and I are like, you could just go on YouTube and watch how they did it. You could literally go on and rewatch it and set your shots up on set and how they did it. So at least it looks good. And it's miraculous that, again, how these movies get made, we don't know. I don't know. It feels like it's impossible to get a movie made in Hollywood, but yet it feels like it should be easy. Like almost anyone could just walk onto a Hollywood set and go, I've got an idea. Here's what to do. And they're like, let's do it. Because so many direct-to-video movies get made. And you're just like, how are these getting made? And how are they getting $10 million? Like Tarantino and Rodriguez made their first films for less money and they're classics. And these guys are getting 10 million and they can't even make back the budget of those movies.
It just goes to show Rodriguez makes his first one for $7,000 and that made his career. These guys have got $10 million and they can barely edit together a coherent plot. So it goes to show how difficult it is. And like I say, we're not even halfway through yet. So we've got our work cut out for us. But there are always, as we've found, there's always a surprise. And we do a thing called once a year. We're doing called the Bruceys, which is like our version of the Bruce Willis Oscars for the films we watched that year. Because you get certain actors just show up that you forgot about. You get people like Thomas Jane and John Cusack and Jason Patrick just showing up in these
Jason
movies.
Momoa,
James Remar.
James Remar. So many. Yeah. And then you realize, you forget, oh my God, that's right. These guys used to be actors.
Oh yeah, I forgot he was in there. So yeah, we're going to introduce a John Cusack award for
the Prince.
For the Bruceys, the actor that just shows up that you forgot was even going to be in it. Yeah, it's been, I will say, I think it's been quite fascinating so far. Because these are films, I don't think I'll ever know anyone personally who would have watched them.
May still be the only people. I wonder if anyone's watched the movies, even though they've listened to the podcast. I wonder if anyone's actually put them on.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised if anyone was like, no, these guys did a great job. I know enough. We're like the Cliff Notes. I don't know if they had that in England, but if you don't want to read a novel, you got the Cliff Notes. We're like the Cliff Notes for the Bruce Willis movies.
Bruce Willis movies for dummies.
Yeah. Guys, watch the films first and then listen to their podcast.
Yeah, please.
And then contact them. Details coming soon. Logo and show music then.
So I don't want this to sound like some trumpeting, patting my back. I have a degree in graphic design. I really just enjoyed designing it. Like I just enjoyed putting it together. And music I did in GarageBand. Like there's no need to reinvent the wheel. GarageBand does such an amazing job with its loops and stuff. I just went in, started putting something together I thought would be kind of a cool representation of what we wanted and went with it. Like some people have like these really great connections with other people who are like real musicians. And even if I had that, I always would feel bad reaching, hey, by the way, can you make this amazing song for free? Exactly, for free. And the podcast may not be heard by a lot of people. So when I have the ability to just kind of have fun doing it, it really isn't a job. It's fun. I mean, I spend a lot of time doing it, but I really do enjoy doing it. So yeah, I tried to make it like when I did it, I wanted to design it like I cut Bruce out of all the font of an image of every movie and cut him out. And I tried to get like this gold look to him. I wanted to make him look like a statue, kind of like a bronze, make it look. I wanted to make it look cooler than it is. I want the logo and my God, that movie looks amazing. I want it to look better than the actual film is. So hopefully, at least I'm fooling people enough. They're like, that gold on black looks pretty nice. Let's click on that one. See how great this film is.
I like the coloring of the logo as well, and
I appreciate it. Thank you.
There. Yeah,
I mean, it was from Pulp Fiction. I mean, listen, I know I sound like I'm sucking Tarantino, but he had a huge influence in me in my movie career. I love him, and I love Bruce Willis in that film. And so I thought, you know what, if we're gonna do it, Die Hard felt like the standard choice. So I was like, let's sidestep Die Hard and let's put this one and see if people. Those who know, and those who don't know, don't. But I didn't want to just be John McClane because I don't want to also trick people into thinking that we're doing we're doing Die Hard. I don't want people to go like, dropping a Bruce, they're talking about Die Hard? No. We are not talking about Die Hard at all.
Hey, it's Rena, host of the Better Call Daddy Show, where I interview guests, share the stories with my dad, and then he weighs in. And you're listening to Pods Like Us.
We were going to go next to standout episodes and films, but I'm going to tell people, just listen to every episode and then be surprised when you suddenly come across a Bruce of a film.
Yes.
There are
Yes.
some. There are some.
Season 1 especially.
Yeah.
There are probably
Episode.
3 films. I can point you to 3 films in season 1 where something had to happen either in marketing or something where the 3 films didn't actually go to the theater because they have casts that are movie theater launch.
Yeah.
The first one being Assassination of a High School President. We get that wrong all the time. We always want to say principal. That is one of those comedies. Look, it's not super bad, but it's in that vein. It's a hilarious movie. It was so well done. It's kind of like Superbad meets Brick. If anyone's seen those 2 films, it's the best way I can kind of describe that. Another one, which was contentious between us, but Catch 44, which is a almost direct Tarantino Pulp Fiction kind of ripoff, but has a great cast. Bruce is spectacular in that as well. It's got Forrest Whitaker, who's spectacular. It's got a lot of good acting in that, and I actually really enjoy that film. Look, it falls short, obviously, but how that didn't go to theaters because it has a theater-ready cast. And then the other one would have been towards the end of season 1 called Once Upon a Time in Venice, which has Bruce in the starring role. We've got John Goodman. We've got Jason Momoa in hilarity. He's amazing. I'm forgetting the man's name he did the TV show on HBO, Silicon Valley, Thomas Middleditch. Thomas Middleditch is in it. Like, there's quite a few guys and ladies in this film. You're like, this was going to go to the theaters, right? Like, it was going to be like a February release. It's not going to come out in the summer. It's not going to come out during Oscar time, but it's like, hey, you got nothing else to do? Why don't you go see Bruce Willis in this really fun comedy? And he's great in that movie as well. And so those are the 3 that were, and you know what? Also, I would say Marauders, but more because of the cast. Christopher Maloney, he's spectacular. What's his name? The wrestler who's having an amazing career. Why am I blanking on him?
Dave Bautista.
Dave Bautista's in it. Like, that's a really decent film. Like, there's a Jonathan Skeet. We would learn how to say his name. Jonathan Sheck. That's right. Yeah. Shech. He's in it. So there's a couple that you're kind of surprised didn't make it to the theaters with the cast and production value. And those are probably the 4 highlights from season 1, I would say. Season 2, we've released at the time we're recording 3 of them or 4 of them. No, 3 of them. And we've recorded 3 others. So we're halfway through this season. I don't know. We're white knuckling it now. Like, we're hoping that maybe the next 6 we'll get one that we go, man, that was the one. But probably the funnest was Airstrike because it's a foreign film filmed in China, and Bruce Willis is playing his own version of Tom Hanks in Saving Private Ryan in the most glorious of ways.
PlayStation 2 levels of CGI. Just some bonkers moments.
Bonkers. I
mean, full of them, really.
And it's really about a Mahjong tournament. I think we figured it's really just a Mahjong tournament happening in the middle of a war. It's just, it's one of those like bad movies that are fun. You can have a drinking game for the amount of ridiculousness that happens in it.
I feel like sometimes there's just a scene.
Oh, yes. There's a couple in that one.
No, but some of them are good. There are some good moments in some of these bad films. So there's always something to talk about. Some people have said, how are you going to do an episode on this film where Bruce Willis is in it for 4 minutes? But we always find there's so much gold.
We have faith in the lack of the directors and writers of this film.
Yeah, they'll give us plenty of ammunition. They'll give us plenty.
And if you listen enough times to our show, we actually start to make it sound like maybe you should watch the film because we're having such a good time talking about how bad it is. Sometimes seems I think we're giving this more credit than I really do. So
actually, I think I did like this movie.
We're the reverse Waldorf and Statler, where they start off, I love this movie all the way to boo, it's terrible. We're like the reverse. Oh, it's great.
Just in passing very quickly, you mentioned someone there who I think Bautista is having a hell of a career. Acting wise,
unbelievable.
Well, look at his choice. Look who he's choosing to be directed by. Whereas The Rock isn't.
He's hitting home runs. He's hitting home.
The Rock is just making garbage movie after garbage movie, as far as I'm concerned. Dave Bautista, for the most part.
Yeah.
But Dave Bautista, you look at who's being directed by. That's the clever guy.
But also the wealth of roles that he's playing as well. It's not just hard man after hard, like the Cena will do to a degree, and like the Rock's doing, and they've got that sort of persona. He's showing a variety in his performances that's just incredible.
Yeah.
Knock at the Cabin Door last year from M. Night Shyamalan, where they use him to be imposing, but yet he's this guy who is having a very tough time with the assignment from God that he believes he is doing in this film. It's spectacular. It's amazing what David T. goes. You see, like The Rock's The Rock, right? Jason Statham, unfortunately, since he's no longer really doing anything with as much as he used to with Guy Ritchie, he's Jason Statham, right? He's just Jason Statham. Hey, look, it's Jason Statham. But Bautista he's a chameleon. I mean, he starts in Guardians of the Galaxy. He's hilarious in that. He's amazing. Such a soft-spoken, nuanced performance, even though he's in it 5 minutes for Blade Runner 2049, in the new Dune movies. I mean, he's just, he is firing on all cylinders, and he deserves every ounce of credit he gets. He is not a flash in the pan. He truly is a fine actor who just happens to also be built like a tank. Not only does he have the goods, he could bring on a renaissance of the smart action hero. He's got the goods of Schwarzenegger, but he has the charisma and the intelligence and ability of Willis. That could be a great new genre blend for him. Who knows what'll come down in his career, but he's been amazing.
Absolutely. So what advice would you give to people starting their own podcast?
Either find really good guests that you really love to talk to, that just have fun with topics. Don't worry about breaking through too much noise. Do it for you. There was a podcast I listened to, and a gentleman was on it, and he made this really great point. He said about people worrying about their numbers. He goes, you're never going to be Joe Rogan. All the famous people get told, not because they're good, but because people know them. So they just trade their name. And he goes, the guy hosted Fear Factor, and he's a comedian. I have people listen to everything he says and take it for gospel. No clue. But he said, imagine talking about your favorite thing you've ever loved, whatever it is. Let's say it's He-Man cartoon. Can you imagine having 30 to 50 of your closest friends or family sitting in a room listening to you talk about it? And he goes, if you can't imagine that, that's not in your belief, then if you get 30 to 50 people to listen to your podcast, that's more than you ever imagined. And enjoy that, because you've got a niche group who want to hear you. And if you're having fun, do it for you. Because this nice medium, when we're long gone, this will still be here. Who knows who will find us many years from now? Who knows, as obviously we're recording, but who knows who's listening now 20, 50 years from now, and maybe we're dead, who's found this and, oh my God, you guys ever listen to this and this? And like we are making a stamp in time, and hopefully people get entertainment out of it. But as long as you're having fun with the people you're talking to, whether it's your co-host or guests, man, to me, it's all gravy. It's just, it's so much fun. It's the highlight of my weeks and my days.
Yeah, that's what I'd say ultimately, is that if you're passionate about the subject of your podcast, that's the main thing. And you've got to enjoy it. Like Scott said earlier, you do it for yourself, and if you're passionate about it, you'll build an audience of your own. And with my radio shows I used to do back in the day, I still get listeners now from shows I did 6 years ago. So Scott's absolutely right. They were always there. Just because someone hasn't listened to it 5 hours after you've posted the show, that doesn't matter. They might listen to it in a year's time. They're always going to be there. And that's the joy. That's the beauty of it. I find podcasts now I didn't know existed, and there's 100 episodes, and I'm like, great. So don't be put off by lack of downloads after you've done 3 shows. If you're enjoying it, keep going. That's the bottom line. So that's all I'd say.
So what shows do you like to listen to then, Steve?
So I love the show Pure Cinema with Brian Sauer and Eric Kane. I really love Joe Dante's show that he does with Josh Olson called The Movies That Made Us. I listen to Scott's Tarantino because I'm a massive Tarantino fan. Although he talked about me on there and he doesn't think I know. I listen to that. And there's one called... that's embarrassing because I can never remember the name because they've named it after a movie, but they've changed it slightly. I think it's Colors of the Dark.
Yeah, it isn't Joe Dante. When you said Joe Dante, it wasn't Joe Dante the filmmaker, was it?
Yes, director of Gremlins.
Oh, I've got to look that one up.
fantastic show because what he does is he'll have writers, producers, directors, stars, and it will just be that person discussing 10 films that they're 10 favorite comedies. Their 10 favorite movies from when they were growing up. Their 10 favorite musicals. You'll be in awe as you listen to the RZA from the Wu-Tang Clan declaring how much he loves Barbra Streisand. You will hear amazing shows. And if I can point out one episode everyone should listen to, The Movies That Made Me. I can't remember the name of the number of the episode, but it's Thomas Jane discussing his love of film noir and especially European film noir. And the funny thing is, I think he thought he had to give a lecture. So his level of research has gone beyond anything I've ever heard. And they've had requests to repost it again and again because he must have a blackboard up on a wall. Must look like a crime scene type situation where he's trying to...
It's got the string up. And everything.
Yeah, he goes all out and it is a fascinating listen. So, yeah, the other one I listen to is Colours of the Dark, which is Elric Kane from Pure Cinema and Rebecca McKendry, and that's a horror movie podcast where, yeah, they'll talk about, well, they've got a good formula where for the first hour of the show, they'll talk about the movies they've seen that week. And then the second part of the show, they'll have a guest on. But as a massive horror fan, that's the other one. So, yeah, they're the shows I listen to.
For me, like Steve, I like Pure Cinema podcasts. I love that. For comedy, I like Two Bears, One Cave. It's hilarity. That's, oh my God, why am I blanking? That's Burt Kreischer and Tom Segura. They have a funny one. But I listen to a lot of the people I've had on my shows, except for this one. Movies, Films, and Flick was one of the ones I used to like, especially when I was thinking about doing Watch This or Die. I wanted to listen to this man's podcast because he talks about random movies, and I wanted to make sure we didn't do the same show. So I was like, I wanted to see how he did it, and I liked his style, and I liked his episodes, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't doing the exact same thing. I listened to my buddies, the podcast nobody asked for. There is also my buddy Petros Silvas. He's got 2 Cage and Coppola connections, where he used to do a lot of Cage, but now he does the Coppola connections in his films. And one that we were on, Getting to Foe You, and Asian Cinema Film Club. I also like them. I know there's more, but it's also hard. I don't want to come across as being some egotistical piece of. I do apologize to your listeners.
You are,
because I do 5 episodes a month for the different things I do. A lot of time is spent listening to the people I've talked to. So I try to listen in the car when I can, but sometimes it's okay, finish the episode, put it up, listen to it to make sure I didn't screw anything up. And then once it goes live, I listen to it one more time just to make sure it's that fear. It's that fear when you send it out. That sounds good, but it's that fear that you've something up. Like somehow you missed something or you left something in, and now people are gonna be like, "Hey, asshole, where's the episode?" or something like that. Because I've done that before accidentally, and so I listen to a lot of what I do only to make sure that it's good and it's in, and make sure, and then I listen to other people's stuff. But I don't want to come across, I only listen to the podcast I'm on. Steve had a good one where someone said, "Hey, did you listen to that show?" He goes, "Was I on that one?" You know what I mean? So,
He said, no. I said, well, I didn't listen to it then. I was pretty joke. Or was I?
So but I do like to listen to a lot of the people who also have me on their shows because it's just fun to share. That's the great thing about podcasting is you get a community of people and friends. Like Steve and you are both in England. I live in New York. The chances of us actually meeting and talking before all this were slim to none. And now I'm having a conversation with you on a Friday afternoon, and we're 5 hours apart, and there's an ocean between us. And it's I don't know, it's just a great thing. I've met so many new people and friends. I think I would rather be dead than stop doing this. I would rather give up everything else and stop doing this, because the friendships I've made and the people I've got to meet and talk to, I mean, every time, as soon as we're done with this, I'm going to have the biggest glow ever. It's like pregnancy glow. It's like my pregnancy glow, because it's been a fun thing to do. That's it's like a high I got to come off of. It's like a drug. And so
it's always great because we're all like-minded fans of film, and you guys now, I've got more in common with in that respect than I have a lot of people I know. They don't watch many movies, or that they're not well versed. Not that there's anything wrong with that. They're just not into that. They just want to put a movie on. They want to watch the latest movie, and that's all they're really interested in. But talking to guys like yourselves, we get to really get into it and look at things a bit deeper and get different perspectives. And like Scott says, like the best part of the week or whatever is just hanging out and chewing the fat over these movies we've seen lately and the enthusiasm and the info we find from each other. That's just the best thing ever.
Yep. And it shows when, here we go, a bit of behind the scenes. This chat was supposed to be booked for an hour and 15 minutes, and we're 2 hours into it.
Sorry.
Yeah.
You feel free to cut after we say,
so
you know
much
what?
fun.
Yeah, apologize.
Yeah,
it is. It's tough because you're like, oh, we're gonna only talk. I tell my wife, only gonna be an hour and a half most. And then she's like, you're in there 2.5 hours. I'm like, I got done recording. We started talking about other things. I don't know, because it's your friends. Like Steve said, I wish we all lived in the same area and this could be like a thing we did all the time, but we don't. And so these moments you get, and like life is, you never know. Like you don't know the next time you may not see or talk to that person. So enjoy. I try to enjoy as much of it as possible.
Make the most of it. Yeah.
Next time I hit the send for the Zoom link, I'm hoping that someone will pop up on the other side and everything's good and we can keep going forward. And that, I don't take any of it for granted. It's just,
we're all avid movie watchers, and that's whenever I'm watching something, I'm like, oh, I've got to tell Scott about this or done so, and we recommend things, and that's part of our other Cheeky Bastard show is our pick of what the best thing we've watched that week and the worst thing. That's what we do. Is we always say, man, I saw a real piece of this week, avoid it. But that's just part of the fun of it. It's just like the sharing of it, the information, and there's so many movies out there. Yeah. But that's nice to be put onto stuff that you didn't know about. That we can all miss things and not know about things. And Scott said we're just like this community of people that otherwise wouldn't know each other, and that's just another sort of byproduct of the whole podcasting thing.
Another byproduct is, to carry on with that, is that you get introduced to films that you never would have thought of watching before. And then when you hear what people saying about them, you think, I might actually go and watch that. And then you enjoy it. And the same goes for other things like music, television shows, everything. And that's how you discover these things. And it's, I'll check that out.
We can't all know everything.
No.
And there's never going to be enough time to watch everything. And when we rip the piss out of some movie, that's all light-hearted, really. I'm not saying whatever you do, don't watch it. It's just, man, that did not deliver. Or
we zipped our balls in our own zippers, so you don't have to. I take our word for this. This is a painful hour.
It's all light-hearted, really. But like you say, something. Scott, I know not to make your show any longer, but Scott highly recommended Bullet Train, and I did not want to see Bullet Train. I watched the trailer and I thought, that's not for me. That was one of my favorite films that year. I ended up buying it. I had an absolute blast, and I would not have probably watched it otherwise. So this is all, and what's better than finding a movie that you not only, it's nice finding a movie you'd never heard of, but if that was something you just had it in your head that you knew more than anyone else and you weren't interested in, and you end up enjoying that too. So there's just so much out there.
And he turned me on to Revenge. Or is it Revenge or Vengeance?
No, Revenge.
Revenge and God is a Bullet last year. Two of my favorite movies I watched last year, because I like violent movies. They're just fun. I just enjoy them. But those are two of I was like, man, those are really good. So it is one of those things where, hey, it's fun, right? Like when you get to see a new movie, you're kind of like, and then you get to pass it on to someone else. I don't, Steve, if he passed on, I don't know that he told that it was me. He could take full credit because you're not going to believe this movie I like.
Yeah, I always say it was me.
Just don't listen to my podcast. Yeah, exactly.
You can't learn anything if you think everything. Bottom line.
That's it. That's true. So where can people find you and get hold of you guys?
All right. So for Dropping a Bruce, you can find us simply at Dropping a Bruce on all the socials. And for our Cheeky Bastards, it's at Cheeky Bastards Podcast on all the socials. And every second Tuesday, about first or second Tuesday, depending, that's a big way to do it, but first, second Tuesday of the month, we do the Cheeky Bastards Are the Men of Action. And then 2 weeks after that episode drops, it is Dropping a Bruce. So we drop an episode twice a month, one for each. And we have a blast doing it. As I said, for Dropping a Bruce, we're going through all 40. We have currently, I think we've just finished number 15, just got released. So 16 will be coming out in June. And we are almost finishing up season 2 of our Men of Action podcast. Our next group that'll be out will be the Rocks movies, and then in July will be Stallone. We were looking at Cobra and Rambo 4. So we're having a blast doing all of them. It's a great way to say, I got to watch these movies for this podcast and feel like, I got to do this job. And I'm like,
I've got to watch Hard. I've got to watch Hard Target and
I know. Oh, what am I going to do? I guess I have to watch these films.
Hard Target.
what was the hard? What was the van? It was Hard Target.
Hard Target and
Yeah.
Time Cop.
Yeah.
Time Cop.
Yeah. And we did Out for Justice and we did Under Siege.
Siege.
Yeah, we've done a couple. We've had some fun doing them. Man.
That's been a blast.
That'll be interesting because I like Time Cop.
Pretty good.
Pretty good.
Wait to see what you say about Tooth Fairy from the Rock's film.
We didn't do that. We skipped the Tooth Fairy.
We did the rundown and
Well done.
Faster. We tried to stay away from the
obvious,
the known obvious ones, right? So for Stallone, we're going to do Cobra and Rambo 4. We're not doing a Rocky versus Rambo. So many people talked about that. We try to at least bring some new info. What movies should you check out from these guys' catalogs? Give them a try, as opposed to for next up for Bruce Willis is Die Hard, then Die Hard 2. So we try to make it a fun mix up. Yeah.
Thanks for speaking with me today, guys.
Thank you for having us on. It was an absolute blast. Thank you so much. Yes.
You can find Pods Like Us on any streaming platform and just look for @Pods Like Us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and Threads, and contact us through podslikeus@gmail.com. And we also have extra bonus episodes on Patreon as well. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening, and hope you listen again to another episode of Pods Like Us.